Welcome to Dignified Family Transitions with Lilie the Lawyer.
Welcome to Dignified Family Transitions with Lilie the Lawyer. Lilie McRoberts is a Minnesota family law attorney and mediator who helps individuals and families navigate divorce and custody matters with a focus on problem solving, not conflict, and practical, respectful solutions. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about divorce mediation in Minnesota, how it works, and when it makes sense. Miss Lilie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Evan. It's really exciting to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure. So, Lilie, before we get into the mediation itself, can you share a bit about your background and what led you to focus on this more problem-solving approach in family law?
Sure, I'm really happy to. I grew up in northern Minnesota in the 80s, and it was a really lovely experience. A family of five, so I'm the second youngest. And right there, when you're the middle child, you're kind of in the middle of conflict all the time. And
Yes,
so
yes.
early on, I started learning about paying attention to what people's interests are and what motivated them in order to argue for my position. I was the squeaky wheel, if you will, growing up. I graduated from law school at the University of North Dakota in 2014, and I was a prosecutor for quite a while. I was city attorney in Valley City, North Dakota, and that you definitely learn how to negotiate positions as an attorney, and certainly as a city attorney where there's all these community interests. But for my entire life, I've been really passionate about getting to know people. I have a philosophy that's guided me through life. It comes from Dolly Parton, I think, is one of the people that really embodies it. And that is, you want to see the best in every single person. Every single person that you encounter in this world has a unique story, just as special as your own. And I love meeting people, identifying what that is, and really empowering those people to make their way along their hero's journey. Everyone's on a hero's journey, and I love empowering those people. Why family law mediation? Because my philosophy in life is I'm a public servant and I go where I'm needed.
Mm,
And I have a very, specific skill set. And as I've said, I'm a listener. I pay attention to what motivates people. I pay attention to what their problems are. And I am excited about the idea that I can flesh those things out and help people get to the why. What is it that we're at a crossroads with? Where do we meet? Where do our interests align? And turn it from uh, position-based negotiation, which is very much I'm here, and if I move, I'm losing, and if I don't move, then I'm winning, to interest-based negotiation. We learned a story in mediation was, two girls are in the kitchen with their mom, and they both want an orange, and they're fighting over this one orange. And then the mom comes in, and the mom's like, well, I'm going to cut the orange in half.
yeah.
You get half and you get half. Well, the one girl peels the orange and throws away the flesh and zests it because she's making a cake. The other girl throws away the peel and eats the orange because she wanted to eat the orange. And if mom had taken the time to figure out what is it that they really want, then one girl would have gotten a whole orange to eat, and the other one would have had all the zest to make the cake. So that's the goal. So I'm
It's,
excited to help people out in this regard.
that's good stuff. When you mentioned the lovely Dolly Parton, I thought you were going to say working 9 to 5, but I was like, well, then you went the other route. You
What's
almost
funny about that quote is, who works 9 to 5? Everybody works 8 to 5. Like if that, I mean, in this country, it's probably more like 5 to 9, unfortunately. But like they're not living in the real world. But I worked a summer in California, and people were working 9 to 5.
yes. Oh,
So,
Cali people, listen, they don't mess around in Cali. I
right.
tell you, they do.
So,
But Miss Lily, so what is family law mediation in Minnesota? How is it different from going through a traditional divorce process in court?
well, that's a really good question. So, family law in Minnesota is really about focusing on the fact that we don't necessarily have to have every single issue in a divorce or in a custody establishment be zero-sum game, right? And so the Minnesota courts have decided that we really do need to at least try mediation, because a lot of people don't really know what mediation is. A lot of people have heard some really bad things, and a lot of people are really disheartened about the idea that, okay, I have to go through this divorce, and now on top of it, you're making me go to a mediator before. Like, why can't I just go to court? We're never gonna agree, and just give me the divorce decree. And that's really, I'm really hoping to encourage people to see that that's not what's going on at all. I mean, it's the judges love to have these cases off their case. It's a way to avoid a trial. So in family law, there's, you file the paperwork, and if you're not in agreement on everything, you're going to be filing a petition to open a case. But then you're going to have a hearing, and the court is going to say, we're not even going to schedule this for trial.
Right.
The trial is like 95% of the cases do not go to trial. 95% of the cases settle. And it is so empowering when you can look at this person who you were a team member with for a while, you maybe have children with together, and say, let's take the power away from the courts. Let's keep the power with us where it belongs and come to an agreement. And most of the time, people are in agreement on most things. And then that mediator is going to get you to to the finish line sometimes, many times. And then you don't have to have someone who doesn't know you, hasn't taken the time to listen to you, doesn't know your stories, doesn't know what makes you unique and special, doesn't know what you're going to use that orange for, and just tells you what you're going to do. Instead, Minnesota has decided we're going to require mediation in almost all instances, so that we give these people an opportunity to find out what their interests really are and come to that creative solution on their own, maybe with the help of a mediator, probably with the help of a mediator who knows exactly what questions to ask to create that resolution. And I think it's great. I think it's great.
So what kinds of issues can actually be worked out in mediation versus needing, a judge to decide?
Yeah. So, well, a standard divorce decree has specific items that you have to identify. You have to let the court know. You have to know what let the other parties know, and a mediator is going to help you identify what it is that so you're gonna have to go. Either you're going to have to find your own attorney, or you're going to have to use the Minnesota self-help forms to file for the divorce before you can really connect with a mediator. You can certainly connect with a mediator and have a mediator help you come to the terms that you would enter into a joint petition.
Right.
If you decided you wanted to work with your spouse and file a joint petition, but you're going to need to either have a lawyer or have or go through the self-help forms yourself to file for a divorce. A mediator cannot file paperwork for you, because there would be an ethical issue. Because if a mediator were filing the paperwork for you, then the mediator would basically be picking sides, and the mediator really needs to be neutral. But all the terms that are in a joint petition or a petition for divorce, which results in the final decree, can be discussed in mediation. Any of the issues that you can't resolve on your own when you go through the joint petition, then a mediator can help you with that. But typically what we look at is, in a divorce, what's at issue is property. A lot of times what's at issue in a divorce is going to be property division,
Right.
and child custody establishment if you have children. So there's two different kinds of divorce. There's dissolution with child and dissolution without child.
Yep.
And there's actually different forms whether or not you have a child or not. But then you also likely have some property. You may have real property. And the mediator is going to help you distinguish between what's marital property and what's not marital property from the time you get married in Minnesota until the time that you file for divorce. Right around the time you file for the divorce, the court presumes that you have uh, everything that you have as marital property, and that kind of alarms people. And same thing for debt. So you're gonna with property division, you're going to work with a mediator to really decide what you think is fair, and what and the goal is to make sure that everyone feels that they're being treated fairly. In Minnesota, the rule is property should be equitably divided. Equitably doesn't always Marital property should be equitably divided. Equitably doesn't always mean equally, though. And so then the goal of mediation is to flesh out, why do you feel like this would be a fair result? Why do you feel like this would be not a fair result? Without getting accusatorial, just make sure that each party gets a sense of what they think is fair. And then you can also do for custody and child parenting time. And those are two different categories. So there's legal custody and there's physical custody. And I don't know if we want to get into the weeds of what all those different things mean, because when I go through and I walk you through the divorce forms at a later session, I can certainly explain to you what is legal custody, what is physical custody. When you hear equal parenting time, is that the same thing as 50-50? Because 50-50 has a very specific meaning. So I'll go through and explain what all those terms mean at a later time. But for right now, yeah, those are the kinds of different things that we can flesh out in mediation, and it's really focused on the parties that are mediating, because they're going to come and they're going to let me know we agree on all these things, and then we'll just focus on the things that they don't agree on.
So how can someone tell if, mediation is a good fit for their situation?
Oh, so that's a good question. And it's really, I think that the only way that you're going to be able to know whether or not mediation is a good fit for you is if you understand what mediation is and what mediation isn't. Mediation is not, the court is making you do this because we want to keep the mediators employed, or the court is making you do this because they just like to make you jump through hoops. The mediation isn't it doesn't have to be you sitting in a room in a physical location with another person yelling at each other. Mediation, if there's domestic violence, that's something that you really, really want to think long and hard about whether or not mediation is a good fit, because mediation is a good fit in almost all circumstances, as long as you know what it is, and as long as you know that there's ways that you can make it work depending on how you get along with your former partner. It's almost always a good idea to have a period of time where you're meeting in one room, but it doesn't always have to, usually a virtual room. Like you can do mediation remotely, or you can do mediation in person. You can do mediation where you and your attorney are in one waiting room, either a virtual waiting room or a real waiting room, and the other party is in another virtual waiting room, and you never actually even see the other person. And then you can do mediation where you meet together. And sometimes it's really good for that, even though it makes them uncomfortable, sometimes it's really good for the mediator to have that moment. First of all, it's more time effective for the people to all be in one room. And so in order to know whether or not it's a good fit for you, I think you need to know what your options are and know what tools are in the mediator's toolkit. I'm working on designing a survey that I can give people that have already scheduled mediation with me, to get an idea of what's going to be a best fit ahead of time for them. And And that way I don't have to sit and fiddle with it when we're actually meeting. So the questions that I would be asking, one of the big ones though, is if you are the victim of domestic violence, or if there's been any sort of domestic violence, which is a defined term. And in a later session, when I do walk through with the domestic violence, I can define what that is and what that looks like. Doesn't mean that it's automatically a no for mediation, but there are exceptions that the court allows for when there's domestic violence. But even if you are a victim of domestic violence or a survivor, or even if you actually were the one that was committing the domestic violence, that doesn't always mean that mediation is a no. We just have to be careful. And one of the things that the mediators are going to be on the lookout is that power and control wheel, because unfortunately, sometimes when you have mediation and there's been domestic violence, I've seen it happen and it's really sad. The mediation is just another tool that the abuser has used to control.
Right.
And and anytime a mediator sees that, they're gonna want to stop, and hopefully we can avoid it happening in the first place.
So can mediation still work if communication between the two people is already strained or it become really difficult, or contentious?
Yes, it can. Not always, especially when we had already talked about domestic violence. When you've got the communication to the point that communication is, you've got the three classic communication types. You've got the assertive, which is the healthy one. You've got the aggressive, you've got the passive. I guess it's four types because then you have the passive aggressive communication style. All of those communication styles you can work with, a mediator can work with, because the mediator's goal is going to be to, what are the interests behind the communication, and try to figure out what it is that they really are interested in resolving, and what the problems are that need to be resolved. The only time you can't is if, like I said, in instances where there's domestic violence and you've got someone that's really using the mediation as another way to exert control over the other party. We really need both parties to everybody's on their own journey, like I said, but both parties ideally are going to be able to get to that point of like the serenity prayer, I focus on what I have control over in this relationship, and I am able to get past the rest. Not everybody is able to do that, but that's kind of the goal, is, at least for this one moment, let's really try to focus. You focus on what you have control over, he focuses on what he has control over, and let's really get to the bottom of these problems and solve them together.
So can you share an example of a situation where mediation helped a family reach a resolution that might have been much harder in the courtroom?
I remember reading that you wanted me to get an example, and I was like, this is like an interview, and in interviews it's so great to know what they're gonna ask, but I didn't actually come up with a specific example. Every mediation session that I've been in as an attorney, I've been like, wow, I didn't really realize that that was the heart of the problem.
Mm,
I didn't realize that that's exactly why my client was pushing so hard for, you know, for this particular issue. And if I had understood that, then I probably would have taken a different approach in my negotiations. But then when my client was able to communicate that to the other party, they're like, "Oh, this is no problem. I didn't know that that's what this was about. Let's come up with this other solution." Yeah, and the solutions work great. So it really is about getting to the heart of the problem and then finding that solution. And
mm,
unless you know why a person has the strong position, absolutely no cell phones until they're 18. Well, I didn't know that, you had a brother that had suicidal ideations because of cell phone usage. And if I had known that, then how about we still let them have cell phones because it's really important that they talk to their friends and talk to me, but let's put restrictions on it so that they can't have any social media. And, and then that's how you come up to, because if you understand why people have the hard lines that they do, instead of just like, I want no phones in my house until 18. Well, I want them to have a cell phone when they're 10, and there's no middle ground. If you understand why people have the reasons that they have, then you can come up with clever solutions.
Good stuff, Miss Lilie. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. That's it for today's episode of Dignified Family Transitions with Lilie the Lawyer. If you're navigating a divorce or custody issue in Minnesota and want to explore a more thoughtful, problem-solving approach, you can learn more about Lilie McRoberts and her work at minnesotasfamilyattorney.com. Thank you for listening, and be sure to like, subscribe to the show, and leave a review if you found this episode helpful. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.